Alright, so I'm going to do a bit of a show and tell video today. It's just have a few different things that some people sent me, and they all happen to kind of form a unified theme in a way, so I'm just going to kind of read them all together here, and you can do with it as you will. The first one somebody sent me was from, this is obviously from some Kabbalistic website, Living Wisdom. And the title of the article is called The Land is a Ball. Master Kabbalists and Their Writings. Prior to Christopher Columbus's famous voyage across the Atlantic, most people thought the world was flat, with a visible edge that one could fall off of into oblivion. Most people thought this, but not all. English Zohar Vayikra, Volume 14, verse 141. Rav Hamnuna Saba, the elder, explains further in his book that the entire inhabited land rolls around like a ball, so that some are up and some are down. To wit, the creatures around the globe are opposite each other, and the 7 sections of the globe are 7 lands, the 7 continents. All of the creatures, all of the 6 lands, are different in their appearance according to the difference in the atmosphere in each place, and they live like any other man. That's right, the Zohar, written over 2,000 years ago, is clearly stating that the world is a globe, and therefore round. It also happens to mention that there are 7 continents, of which 6 are inhabited. Let us continue. English Zohar Vayikra, Volume 14, verse 142. There is an inhabited place, so that when there is light on some, on that side of the globe, it is dark for others on the other side of that world. Thus, when it is day for one group, it is night for the other. There is an inhabited place where there is day only and no night, save only for a little while. Antarctica. Here the Zohar is demonstrating the grasp of the concept of the earth spinning on an axis and revolving around the sun. This was not widely accepted or understood until the 16th century, only some 1,500 years later. So this obviously is interesting because, I mean, if we had verses like these in the Bible, then obviously there would, would there even really be able to be any debate over, whether the Bible teaches that the earth is a globe in space? I mean, this is pretty dang explicit. Yet nothing like this exists in the real scriptures, and yet in the Zohar is where you find it. Food for thought. Again, always comes back to the Kabbalah. So, speaking of the Kabbalah, another friend sent me this. This is a portion from a book on experiencing nature. The Geometrical Kabbalahs of John Dee and Johannes Kepler, the Hebrew Tradition, and the Mathematical Study of Nature. So not only does the Kabbalah teach explicitly that there's a globe and that you can be standing on opposite sides of it and 7 continents and all that, just the idea of mathematical abstraction as well as connecting this to Neoplatonism. So this is an interesting excerpt. I'm just going to read like these 2 pages here. The Geometrical Kabbalahs of John Dee and Johannes Kepler, the Hebrew Tradition, and the Mathematical Study of Nature, by Michael T. Walton and Phyllis Walton. Renaissance Neoplatonism was marked by a preoccupation with restoring ancient wisdom as a foundation for present and future knowledge. Although its adherents often had divergent and idiosyncratic agendas, there was a consistent emphasis on developing a Christian worldview grounded in knowledge of the harmony of God's creation, which itself is something that you have to ask, is that something that God even asks us to do? But never mind. The Renaissance Neoplatonic synthesis of Christianity and ancient philosophy was significantly reinforced by the discovery of the Kabbalah, the Jewish esoteric tradition. The Kabbalah taught a descending order of creation from the perfection of God to the imperfect material world. The letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which are also numbers, were the basic units of creation. The notions of creation by descent and numerical harmonies indicated similarities between the Kabbalah and the ideas of Pythagoras and of Plato. The correspondences were believed to demonstrate that both traditions shared a common origin, i.e., divine revelation to Adam, Abraham, or Moses. Renaissance Christians, like Pico di Mirandola, Johannes Reuchlin, and Franciscus Georgius, looked to the Jewish mystical tradition in their attempts to rediscover the wisdom behind the Hebrew scriptures. They also viewed the Kabbalah as a sacred original from which the pagan philosophers derived their knowledge. Numerous studies have established the importance of Neoplatonism and the Christian Neoplatonic Kabbalah to the intellectual life of the 16th century. The lasting effects of this worldview on European thought, however, are much less clearly understood. One area in which the Neoplatonic Kabbalistic philosophy can be shown to have shaped future thought is in helping to establish the idea that mathematical abstraction is descriptive of nature. How easily Neoplatonism could be connected to Hebrew Kabbalah is seen in the similarity between the ideas of the 6th century philosopher Boethius and the fundamental Kabbalistic text Sefer Yetzirah. Both were popular sources for 16th century Neoplatonism. Boethius taught that, quote, all things do appear to be formed by the reason of numbers, for this was the principal example or pattern in the mind of the Creator, unquote. This belief was supported by Sefer Yetzirah, or Book of Formation. Yetzirah declared that God created the world through three aspects of the verb to number. He created his word cosmos through three numberings by writing, Sefer, number Sophar, and telling, Sipper. For Renaissance Neoplatonists, the view that number underlies all creation was axiomatic. The success of 16th century mathematicians in showing correspondences between observable phenomena and mathematical abstractions, such as geometrical figures, was proof that number is the basis of the natural world. This served to establish mathematics as an indispensable tool for reading the, quote, book of nature, God's second great scripture. Mathematics thus became an integral part of natural philosophy, not only for Renaissance Neoplatonists, but also for succeeding generations. How the Neoplatonic Kabbalistic tradition helped to routinize mathematics into the study of nature is illustrated by an analysis of the sources for and the impact of the, quote, geometrical Kabbalahs of John Dee and Johannes Kepler. John Dee, English magus mathematician, focused the general elements of Neoplatonism into his area of special interest, the relationship of mathematics to nature. He was enormously well-read and wrote on a wide variety of topics. Two of his works, however, the Monus Hieroglyphica and the, quote, mathematical preface, are crucial to understanding the role played by the Neoplatonic Kabbalistic philosophy in his mathematics. Anyways, fortunately that's all I have to read. It seems like you have to, I don't know why this book is so expensive. $139 for an ebook? Does that make any sense? I don't know. So, there's a little clip. I'll leave this link, but, yeah, John Dee and Kepler. I'm curious what else it had to say. Anyways, so finally, from The New Scientist, somebody also sent me this article, which is, The New Scientist is, yeah, now we're definitely talking about a publication that is more into the esoteric. So this one's called Why Two Geniuses Delved into the Occult by Amanda Gefter. In his latest book, Deciphering the Cosmic Number, historian of science Arthur Miller investigates the bizarre friendship between quantum physics pioneer Wolfgang Pauli and famed psychoanalyst Carl Jung. Together, the two great thinkers delved into mysticism, numerology, and alchemy in their quest to understand the universe and themselves. Miller tells New Scientist about his experience writing the book. What drew you to write about the relationship between Jung and Pauli? As a physicist, I was, of course, aware of Pauli's scientific achievements. Meanwhile, my interest in creative thinking had led me to Jung. Almost by accident in the 1980s, I spotted on a library shelf a book they co-authored, The Interpretation of Nature and the Psyche. This really intrigued me. What did the apparently austere Pauli have to do with Jung, who routinely delved into the occult and whose reputation sometimes suffered for it? Their book is actually made up of two essays. Jung's is on synchronicity, nothing unexpected there, but Pauli's was a real eye-opener. He wrote on Johannes Kepler and explored how his scientific achievements had to be understood within the times in which he lived. This involved looking into alchemy, mysticism, and religion. Amazingly, he included his own research into this area. This dazzled me. I had never imagined him to be an expert on such esoteric material and so passionate about it. I had to know more about both of them. What was their connection? Who was the real Wolfgang Pauli? What was the most interesting thing you discovered? I was amazed that each considered the other's work to be of equal importance. For Jung, quantum physics, and for Pauli, Jung's analytic psychology, with its emphasis on alchemical symbols, numbers, and myths, as well as Eastern religion and philosophy. The two sat for hours on end in Jung's Gothic-like mansion on the shores of Lake Zurich, dining on fine foods, drinking vintage wine, and smoking the finest cigars, while discussing topics from physics and whether there is a cosmic number at the root of the universe. Ties right into what we were just reading before, doesn't it? I mean, it goes back to Kabbalah, John D. To psychology, ESP, UFOs, Armageddon, Jesus, Yahweh, and Polly's dreams. Theirs was a journey into the mind. As Jung put it, with Polly he could enter, quote, the no man's land between physics and the psychology of the unconscious, the most fascinating yet the darkest hunting ground of our times, unquote. Wow. Why were two such great scientists drawn to these occult ideas? Even as a boy, Jung found himself drawn to the occult. This would become the root of his break with Freud. Unlike Freud, Jung was interested in aspects of the unconscious that could not be attributed to an individual's personal development but derived from a deeper, non-personal realms common to humankind, the collective unconscious, whose contents he called, quote, archetypes. Jung came to realize that understanding the collective unconscious involved using images and symbols from alchemy and myth. So you guys understand, right, that when he talks about the collective unconscious, that's just a different name and a different conception of, he's talking about the spiritual realm. And when he says archetypes, those are the entities in that spiritual realm. But so from the quote-unquote psychology, he's putting a psychology spin on it so that it's all in your mind. The collective unconscious, so we each have our individual unconscious, but we're all tapped in together somehow. So he's just taking ancient occultism, ancient concepts, and then just like with science fiction and so many other things where you just kind of, you relabel everything. And, oh, it's new and it's not new. It's just the same old thing with a different hat. Okay, and that's all Jung was doing. He had a spirit guide and everything. Okay. As a graduate student, Polly became interested in the 17th century scientist and mystic Johannes Kepler. Reading Kepler convinced him that finding universal laws of nature required going beyond science as it is ordinarily defined. Polly turned to Jung for help in response to a life-threatening crisis in 1932. Psychoanalysis with Jung led him to believe that alchemy and mysticism were the means to open up his mind, to increase his creativity and understand what drove him. Jung showed Polly that the symbols from alchemy were the key to why he had experienced so much angst in discovering the exclusion principle in 1924, and why this angst had to do with his neurosis. Throughout the rest of his life, Polly saw his research through the lens of Jung's analytic psychology, i.e., occult belief systems. This was the case in his work towards CPT symmetry, on parity violation, and his final crusade with Heisenberg towards a unified field theory of elementary particles. Wow, there we go again. Definitely going to have to look more into this Polly guy. Was there any merit in these ideas? I believe so, yes. Even though through such ideas they developed an avenue to begin to understand that elusive thing called consciousness. Each believed that their own subjects in isolation lacked the tools and ideas to do this. To Polly, quantum physics was restricted to examining the attributes of atoms as explainable by mathematics. In this, atoms are treated as dead matter, but how do the atoms and molecules that make us up combine to give us the ability to contemplate love, hate, death, and the universe? To Jung, on the other hand, psychology lacked the concepts to deal with phenomena such as synchronism, that is, meaningful coincidences. Although the two men never came up with answers, the questions they raised, the level of their discussions, and their quest to fold physics and psychology together merit further consideration. That was one of the reasons I wrote this book. What did they each gain from their relationship? They gained confidence that their struggle towards an interdisciplinary explanation of the mind was worthwhile. Polly became more than an au courant with Jung's psychology, myths, Eastern religions, and philosophy. Under Polly's tutelage, Jung became somewhat conversant with basic ideas of quantum physics. Both were entranced by Niels Bohr's notion of complementarity, which asserts a reconciliation of opposites, such as wave and particle, in a framework not unlike that of yin and yang. Wow. By the way, yeah, Niels Bohr, he has a yin and yang on the wall of his of the Niels Bohr Institute, that Order of the Elephant thing. Let's see if I can dig that up. Yeah, so he was a mystic too. Jung learned that a basic principle of alchemy, reconciliation of opposites into a unity, pervades quantum physics too. And they each gained a friend and profitable insight into a very different way of thinking about the universe. A very old way of thinking about the universe. So yeah, crazy how these three things kind of all tie in together, and man, just underscores all the same line of direction. So thanks to everyone who sent me stuff, and keep on sending your emails and sending me articles and links and all the fun stuff. I can't get to them all, obviously, but I try and kind of pick the ones that pique my interest and hopefully will spark other people to continue to research all these things more, so that you can the whole point is so that you can show people that when we say, look, this stuff did not actually come from a biblical worldview. I mean, when you look into the Renaissance, when you look into Neoplatonism, when you look into the effects of Hermeticism and Kabbalah and alchemy, that it's just riddles all this stuff, all the way from, I mean, Neoplatonism goes all the way back to Augustine, right? But it's just been I kind of look at this Neoplatonism as that one kind of philosophical gateway drug that the church at large, or Christianity at large, was never able to really shake off. And eventually, because as that second thing I was reading was the Neoplaton, Plato, Neoplatonism, just Greek philosophy in general. I mean, it's when you really boil it down, it has way more in common with Kabbalah and mysticism and the occult than it does with the Bible. But of course, all these guys, all these scholars, were just so enamored with the Greeks and Plato and all this stuff that they had to try, and they couldn't help themselves. They had to try and synthesize it. They had to try and usurp it for God. And then yet eventually, had this, a little bit of yeast works through the whole dough, and that's exactly what happened. And you see all these steps and these stages where all this idea of quantifying the universe, quantifying creation, and using that there's an underlying language. I mean, you hear people today like Jason Lyle. He's completely bought into this idea that math and numbers is the language of God, and it's permeated. So yeah, you treat the creation as this quote unquote book of nature, even though the Bible doesn't ever talk about there being a second book. I mean, in some ways it's kind of like it's like a weird version of kind of like with what Mormonism attests to. Like there was a second revelation of the gospel, right? It wasn't enough just to have the Bible. There needed to be the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith and all that. But we totally denounce that, but then we turn around and we affirm these ideas. The Book of Nature and natural philosophy, and it was just another Trojan horse. Another gateway drug. I don't know, I'm running out of good analogies, but you hear what I'm saying. So anyways, thanks for sending me this stuff. Bye. The visible edge that one could fall off of into oblivion. Most people thought this, but not all. English Zohar Vayikra, Volume 14, verse 141. Rav Hamnuna Saba, the elder, explains further in his book that the entire inhabited land rolls around like a ball, so that some are up and some are down. Alright, so I'm going to do a bit of a show and tell video today. It's just have a few different things that some people sent me, and they all happen to kind of form a unified theme in a way, so I'm just going to kind of read them all together here, and you can do with it as you will. The first one somebody sent me was from, to wit, the creatures around the globe are opposite each other, and the 7 sections of the globe are 7 lands, the 7 continents. All of the creatures, all of the 6 lands are different in their appearance according to the difference in the atmosphere in each place, and they live like any other man. That's right, the Zohar, written over 2,000 years. This is obviously from some Kabbalistic website, Living Wisdom. And the title of the article is called The Land is a Ball. Master Kabbalists and Their Writings. Prior to Christopher Columbus's famous voyage across the Atlantic, most people thought the world was flat.